Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. Most mornings I woke before the sun had fully settled over the water. My name's Marcus Talbot. I'm 74 years old, and I live in a sunroom that's been converted into a makeshift bedroom on the first floor of my daughter's house in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. The old joints don't bend like they used to. Getting out of bed is a production now, one I try to manage before anyone else is up. But Janine always beats me to it. "Are you up, Dad?" she asked this morning, same as every other, rapping once on the glass door before pushing it open. I was sitting on the edge of the daybed, tying my slippers. "Yep," I said, just about to come up for coffee. She didn't come inside. She never did. She glanced around like she was scanning for a mess, then flicked her eyes toward me. "Well, Alex got a meeting at 8, so if you want to grab your breakfast early, now's the time." "Sure thing." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't warm either, just efficient. A little tight, like she was always one email behind or one bill too many. She used to smile when she talked to me. Now it was more like she tolerated my presence. Like the only reason I was still here was because nobody had the heart or the time to figure out a better plan. They didn't know I was the plan, that I always had been. I followed her up the stairs a few minutes later, keeping my steps slow so my knees didn't scream. The kitchen was bright with the kind of open floor plan people pay top dollar for. Alex sat at the table, dressed like every day was a job interview. He gave me a nod, eyes still glued to his laptop screen. "Morning, Marcus." "Morning." He didn't look up again. I poured myself some coffee and sat in the corner chair, the one they called Dad's spot, even though nobody said it with affection anymore. I listened as Alec mumbled something about market rates and Janine scrolled on her phone. Sometimes I imagine telling them the truth, that I bought this house 20 years ago, with the winnings from a fishing boat raffle I never told a soul about, not even Marion. She had begged me to keep it quiet, terrified what the money would do to our kids. "It'll change the way they see us," she warned. "It'll change what they expect." She was right, so we told everyone we were renting. Janine took over the bills when Marion passed. I let her. She thinks she owns this house now, or maybe she just thinks I'm lucky she took me in. Either way, she talks about helping me like she's doing me a favor. And I let her. I let her believe it because that's easier than what would happen if she knew. If she knew that she and Alec weren't paying rent, they were collecting it. It still floors me how quickly people can forget what love used to look like once they think they're owed something. The last time Garrett visited was Christmas 2 years ago. And even then he stayed long enough to eat pie, argue politics, and ask for $5,000 to hold him over. So, when I saw his SUV pull into the driveway on a random Saturday, my stomach turned before he even stepped out. Janine was already at the door, beaming like the Pope himself had arrived. "Garrett's here," she called toward the kitchen, as if I hadn't noticed the engine, the car doors, the whole production. I stepped out of the sunroom, buttoning my cardigan. His wife, Nicole, climbed out on the passenger side, already shouting greetings into the air like we were long-lost best friends. Their kids, Chase and Ellie, didn't even glance my way. Just barreled past me into the house, eyes glued to their phones. Garrett swaggered up with that same salesman's smile he always wore when he was about to ask for something. "Hey, Pops," he said, giving me a one-armed hug that barely touched. "Hey, son." He didn't ask how I was, didn't ask how I'd been. Just turned to Janine and said, "This place still looks great. Man, I miss the ocean air." Janine was all smiles. "You should come more often." "I would if the marina didn't eat up every second of my life," Garrett said, sighing like he was the only man who'd ever worked a full week. We sat awkwardly in the living room for a while, me in my corner chair, Janine perched stiffly on the arm of the couch, Garrett leaning forward like he was building suspense. Nicole made herself busy in the kitchen with Janine, which meant it didn't take long for Garrett to launch into the real reason he came. "I'm just gonna say it," he began, hands rubbing together. "The marina's in a rough patch. We had a rough hurricane season last fall. Insurance is still dragging its feet, and I'm trying to keep the guys paid, but..." I stared at the fireplace, waiting for the number. "I just need a little help," he said. "Nothing major. Maybe 20 grand. Just a bridge until I can refinance." I blinked slowly. "I'm sorry, son. I can't help with that." He didn't hide the disappointment. "Come on, Dad. I wouldn't be asking if I had any other options." "I believe you, but I'm not in a position to lend out money." He sat back like I'd insulted him. "Not even to your own son?" "I've helped before, Garrett." Yeah, a long time ago. He stood up abruptly. Whatever, I get it. You're just gonna sit here, watch the waves, and let your own family sink. Classy. Nicole returned, looking confused. Already leaving? We've got a long drive, Garrett muttered, herding the kids back to the car. After they left, Janine hovered near the doorway, arms folded. You could have helped him. I said no, Janine. That's allowed. She scoffed. You've been living here rent-free for years. You've barely lifted a finger to support this family. And the one time Garrett actually needs you, you say no? I didn't realize I owed him $20,000 just for aging. She didn't respond, just shook her head and stormed upstairs. I sat alone in the quiet, hands folded over my stomach. Marion had always said this would happen. If they knew we had money, they'd eat us alive, she once told me. God, how I miss her voice. Steady, soft, never judging. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time any of them visited without a handout. I couldn't. It started with a printed spreadsheet and a forced smile. Janine set it in front of me at the kitchen table one morning, alongside my usual mug of lukewarm coffee. We've been looking at the bills, she said, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. And with how much everything's going up, heating oil, electric, food, we thought it was time to reassess the finances. Alex stood beside her, arms folded like he was preparing for a negotiation. We're not saying anything's wrong, Marcus. It's just, things are tight. I glanced at the paper, a neat breakdown of every household expense, half of which I was supposedly responsible for. My rent was highlighted in yellow, and below that, a suggested increase, $300 more per month. Utilities up too. Trash and recycling, suddenly itemized. I looked up slowly. This is quite the jump. Alex shrugged. We've been shouldering the difference for a while now. Janine chimed in, her tone firmer now. We just need you to start contributing more. It's only fair. Fair. That word rolled around in my head like a marble in a tin can. I didn't say what I wanted to say, that the mortgage they were so stressed about didn't exist, that their precious property taxes had been paid off years ago with a single check from a secret bank account they didn't even know existed, that this whole damn house was mine. Instead, I nodded, slow and polite. I'll do what I can. Good, Alex said too quickly. We figured you'd understand. I mean, you're lucky to be here, really. Lucky? He said it like he was doing me a favor, like letting me sleep in a sunroom and drink day-old coffee was some kind of gift from on high. I looked down at my hands, still steady, still scarred from years of real work. My thumb brushed the thin gold band on my finger, worn down after decades of marriage and labor and sacrifice. Marion would have had a field day with this conversation. Back then, I would have argued. I would have reminded them how much I gave up to make their lives easier, how many birthdays I missed working double shifts, how I used to fix Garrett's car in the driveway every other weekend, and paid Janine's college tuition when she came up short. But now I just wanted peace. So I swallowed my pride and nodded again. I'll get you something next week. Janine looked relieved. Alec gave a tight smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. They walked off together, satisfied. I finished my coffee in silence. That night, I sat in my little sunroom and ran the numbers in my head. They were charging me more than they paid for their first apartment back in Boston. I could afford it, of course. I could write them a check that would cover the whole year and never blink. But I didn't. Because it wasn't about the money. It was the way they looked at me now. Not like a father, not even like a roommate. Just a bill they hadn't figured out how to get rid of yet. It happened on a Tuesday morning, right after my walk. I was leaning on the mailbox, catching my breath, when Joe Callahan from 2 doors down strolled past with his oversized golden retriever and a coffee the size of his head. You hear about the Colburn place? He asked, pointing his thumb down the street toward the faded blue ranch that had been sitting empty for months. I shook my head. Somebody finally buy it? Oh yeah, Joe said, grinning. 915. Can you believe that? Things barely been touched since the 90s. I blinked. 900? 915, he said again, raising his eyebrows like it still shocked him. Cash offer, no contingencies. This market's nuts. I nodded and smiled, but something shifted in my chest as I turned to go back inside. 900,000 for that place. And mine, this one, the one I bought in secret all those years ago, was larger, had better land, and a clean view of the water from the upstairs deck Alec used to barbecue on every third Sunday. Back in the sunroom, I sat with my coffee and stared out through the salt-smudged windows. The curtains Janine picked were cheap polyester, not Marian's style at all. Marian would have chosen linen, light, airy, something that moved with the wind. That house down the street sold for nearly $1 million. My house. The thought hit harder than it had any right to. My house. Still in my name, still fully mine. Though they didn't know it. Janine talked about it like it belonged to her. Alec made comments about property taxes and home repairs like they were doing me a favor by letting me live here, and I'd let them. All these years, I'd swallowed my pride in the name of peace. But peace hadn't come. Only smaller rooms and tighter glances. The feeling that I was furniture that cost too much to move. That afternoon, while they were both at work, I pulled out my laptop, the one Emily had helped me set up, and typed in Fairhaven Real Estate Appraisers. I picked the third name down. Neutral, local, no photos. "Hi," I said when a woman answered. "I'm calling about a property assessment." "Are you selling soon?" she asked brightly. "Just thinking about my options." She took my name. I gave her a fake one. Walter Reed, the name of my childhood fishing captain. She didn't blink. We scheduled a walkthrough for Friday morning, while Janine and Alec would be out. I hung up, heart pounding harder than it should have. I sat back in my chair and stared out the window again. The sky was starting to turn pink, the water calm. It looked the same as it always had, but something had changed. For the first time in years, I imagined a door opening, not for someone to come in, but for me to walk out. It was a Thursday evening when they called me into the living room, like a teenager about to be scolded. Alex stood by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. Janine sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, a manila folder in her lap. They didn't offer me a seat, so I stood. "We've been going over the budget again," Janine started, "and we've come to a decision." Alex stepped forward like he was presenting a quarterly report. Starting next month, we're going to need you to contribute an additional $600 for rent and utilities. It's just not sustainable otherwise. I stared at him. He said it so casually, like $600 meant nothing to a man on a fixed income. I wasn't angry, I wasn't even surprised. I had felt this coming like a slow-moving storm. "I see," I said. Janine looked at me, her lips tight. "We know that's a big change, but we're shouldering a lot. Alec works full-time. I'm juggling everything here, and we feel it's only fair," Alec cut in. "You've had a good run here." A good run. I glanced at the man who married my daughter, who now stood in my house telling me I was lucky to have had a roof over my head. He was wearing a sweater I bought him 2 Christmases ago. "And if I can't pay that?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "Well," Janine said carefully, "we'd have to explore other options. Maybe look into assisted living communities, something more suited to your needs." That word, suited, settled in my chest like lead. I didn't flinch. I just nodded once. "I'll think about it." Janine sighed with relief. Alec clapped his hands once. "Glad we're all being adults about this." I didn't answer. I walked down to the sunroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. By 9 o'clock that night, the lights were off upstairs. I waited an extra 30 minutes just to be sure. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number the real estate agent had given me. "This is Karen. It's Marcus," I said quietly. "I'm ready." She didn't hesitate. "I'll draw up the listing agreement tonight. When can we do photos?" "Tomorrow afternoon," I said. "They'll be out." "Perfect." I hung up and stared into the dark room, heart pounding. I reached for the small suitcase under my bed and began packing the things that mattered. A photo of Marian and me in front of the boat I'd won, my father's pocket knife, a stack of letters from the early days of our marriage, a few changes of clothes, nothing else. I left the rest, the books I never read anymore, the chair with the worn armrest, the wool blanket that didn't warm me like it used to. It all belonged to a version of me that was slowly disappearing. I paused with Marian's picture in my hands. Her smile still gave me courage. She would have told me I'd waited long enough. I whispered, "It's time." Then I zipped the suitcase shut, and for the first time in decades, I felt the ground beneath me shift, not from age, but from choice. I waited until just after dawn. The house was still quiet, the kind of quiet that always came with a weekday morning before the coffee brewed, before Alex started pacing during his calls and Janine's phone started barking reminders. I stepped softly out of the sunroom, suitcase in hand, already packed with everything that mattered. A grocery bag tucked under one arm held a thermos, my medications, a pair of old binoculars, and the radio Marion loved. The one that only played static until you turned it to the station, with sea shanties and bluegrass late at night. Upstairs, I could hear the shower running. Good. That would buy me time. But before I reached the front door, I stopped by Emily's room. I tapped once and eased it open. She sat cross-legged on the bed in a sweatshirt and flannel pajama pants, reading something on her laptop. She blinked up at me. "Grandpa?" "I'm heading out," I said quietly. Her brow furrowed. "Now?" I nodded. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She closed the laptop and moved to sit beside me on the edge of the bed. "What's going on?" "I need to go, sweetheart," I said. "Not just for a walk, for good." Emily's eyes widened. "Wait, are you serious?" I nodded again. "I've found a little place over by the shipyard. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. All mine." She sat back slowly, processing it. Then her voice dropped. "Does Mom know?" "No," I said. "And I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell her. Not yet." "Is this about the rent thing?" "It's about everything," I said. "But mostly it's about me being ready." Emily didn't speak right away. Then she reached over to grab a notebook from her desk and tore out a sheet of paper. She scribbled down her phone number and slid it into my palm. "Can I visit?" she asked. My throat caught. I nodded. "Anytime." "Promise you'll tell me if you need anything." "I will," I said, and I meant it. I stood to leave, but she hugged me tight, arms wrapped around my ribs like she was anchoring me to the floor. I closed my eyes and hugged her back. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered, "for the way they treat you." "It's not your fault," I said. "You're the one thing that kept me here longer than I probably should have stayed." She gave a watery smile. "Well, I'm proud of you." That nearly broke me. I kissed her on the forehead, then stepped out the front door as the sun finally cleared the horizon. No one else stirred. My taxi waited at the curb. By mid-morning, I had the keys in hand. The cottage was small, 2 rooms and a galley kitchen, but the windows opened wide, and you could hear the gulls outside. There was a crooked little patio with a rusted bench, and inside, the wood floors creaked under every step. But it was mine. That night, I sat in an old rocking chair by the window, a cup of black coffee in one hand, Marion's radio humming softly in the other. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. The phone call came just after lunch. I was trimming the hedges in front of the cottage when it rang, an unfamiliar number lighting up the screen. I wiped my hands on my jeans and let it go to voicemail. Less than a minute later, it rang again. Same number, but now I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. I picked up. "Mr. Talbot?" The voice was clipped, professional. "This is Claire Winters from Shoreline Realty. I just left your daughter and her husband at the property. I thought I should give you a heads up." I set down the clippers and stepped into the shade. "How'd it go?" There was a pause on the other end, then, "They're shocked, confused, mostly angry. Janine demanded to know who authorized the sale. I told them the truth." "I figured," I said. "She didn't take it well." "No, I imagine she didn't." 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, Janine's number lit up in big, bold letters. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad!" she barked. "Tell me this is some kind of mistake." "It's not." "You sold the house?" "I did. You can't just..." She sounded like she was choking on the words. "You didn't even own it." "Yes, Janine," I said calmly. "I did." There was silence on the other end, then, "What are you talking about?" "You always said you were renting it from us." "I let you believe that," I said. "Your mother and I bought that house years ago, cash, after I won that raffle." She didn't say anything. I could hear the hum of traffic behind her and Alex's voice in the background, high-pitched and panicked. "I don't understand," she finally said, voice quieter now. "Why would you do this behind our backs?" I sighed. "Because it's the only way I'd be allowed to leave with my dignity. You lied to us." "I protected myself," I said, voice steady. "After years of veiled resentment, demands, ultimatums, I had to. You made me feel like a burden in a house I paid for. I thought about telling you many times. Marion talked me out of it. She knew?" "She did, and she was right to worry. The second you thought I had nothing, I became a bill you didn't want to pay. And if you'd known I had everything, I would have become a bank you never stopped cashing from." "That's not fair," Janine snapped. "No," I said. What wasn't fair was being treated like I should be grateful for a sunroom and stale coffee. A long silence followed. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow. "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked. "That's up to you and Alec. You blindsided us." "No, Janine." I finally took my turn. Her voice broke, sharp and bitter. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family. You did it to me first." The line went quiet. Then, just before she hung up, she spat, "You just wanted to humiliate us." "No," I said. "I wanted peace." Click. I stood there a long time after the call ended, the ocean breeze tugging at my sleeves, the scent of seagrass rising from the marsh behind the house. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like something had been scrubbed away after years of being buried beneath it. I picked up the hedge clippers again and returned to work. I still had a life to finish building, this time one that belonged only to me. Garrett called me the next morning. I let it go to voicemail, but he didn't give up. 4 missed calls in an hour, then a text. "Just heard what happened. You really screwed over Janine and Alec. Unreal. Call me." By noon, I gave in and answered. "Dad," Garrett said, voice sharp. "What the hell is going on?" "I assume you're talking about the house." "Damn right I am. You sold it out from under them, without telling anyone?" "I didn't need to tell anyone. It was mine." He went quiet for a beat, then he scoffed. "Unbelievable. All these years, you let them think they were helping you." "And they weren't," I said evenly. "They were helping themselves to my silence." "So that's it? You just walk away?" I could hear the pivot coming before he said it. I knew Garrett too well, and sure enough, a moment later, his voice softened. Fake soft, like a script he dusted off for situations like this. "Look, Dad, I get it. You're upset. Maybe Janine went too far, I don't know. But now that the house is sold, I figure maybe you've got some room to help me out." There it was. "My marina's still bleeding. I'm not asking for much, just a cushion to stay afloat." "No," I said. "You haven't even heard how much—" "I don't need to," I said calmly. "I'm not funding your business. I'm not funding anything." Garrett went cold again. "So what? You're just gonna hoard it all until you die? Let your family struggle while you sit on a pile of cash? I let my family lean on me for 30 years. I'm done." "You know what?" he snapped. "You always were stingy. No wonder Mom never trusted you with anything important." He hung up before I could answer. Not that I would have. That evening I heard a knock on the cottage door. I opened it to find Emily holding a paper bag and a bottle of iced tea. "I brought snacks," she said, smiling shyly. "Figured you might want company." I stepped aside, trying not to show how relieved I was. "You're always welcome here." She took off her shoes at the door, Marion would have liked that, and settled at the little kitchen table while I poured us both tea. "Mom's been losing it," she said. "Dad won't talk. Grandma's threatening to take legal action, whatever that means." "I expected as much." Emily leaned in, her voice low. "They're all missing the point. You were kind to them for years, and they treated you like dead weight." I gave her a sad smile. "And you didn't." She sipped her tea. "I always liked sitting with you. You were the only one in that house who ever listened." We talked for over an hour, about her school, her dreams, the music Marion used to play when she baked bread. Before she left, I opened a drawer and pulled out a small envelope with her name on it. "What's this?" "A college fund," I said. "Something your grandmother and I set aside long ago. I added to it recently. It's yours now." She blinked, stunned. "Grandpa." "You've always seen me," I said. "Now I see you." She hugged me tightly, and when she left, she promised she'd be back next week. As I sat on the porch, the wind coming in from the bay, I thought about all I'd lost, and the one thing I'd finally gained, peace rooted in truth, and one person who loved me without a price tag. It was early spring when Janine showed up. No call. No warning. I spotted her from the kitchen window, stepping out of a shiny black crossover in a wool coat too heavy for the mild weather. She looked like she'd taken extra time with her hair, like she wanted to present a version of herself that didn't look abandoned. I didn't move, just waited. She knocked lightly, then opened the gate and let herself into the garden. "This where you've been hiding?" she said. I dried my hands on a dish towel and met her at the back door. "I wouldn't call it hiding." She looked around. Her eyes moved over the porch chairs, the window boxes starting to bloom, the wind chimes above the eaves. Her lips pressed together. "You've been busy," she said. "I've been living," I said. Janine tried a small smile, the kind she used when she was working a client at her old real estate job. "You look, well," I nodded. "I am." She hesitated, fingers fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I thought maybe you'd want to talk." "Clear the air, Janine," I said gently. "You're not here to clear anything. You're here to find out if I feel guilty." She blinked. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is everything that led up to me having to sell my own house in secret just to be treated with dignity." Janine folded her arms. "I was under a lot of pressure. You don't know what Alec and I do know," I cut in, voice calm but firm. "I know what it's like to carry a family. I did it for 40 years, and I never once used it as an excuse to belittle the people who love me." She flinched at that, but didn't argue. There was a long silence, just the wind and the distant cry of a gull from the water. Then she tried a different angle. "I just thought maybe you'd be lonely out here." I smiled, slow and small. "I was lonely long before I left." Her face fell, the mask cracking just enough to reveal whatever guilt she still had buried under her practiced calm. She took a breath like she wanted to argue, to justify, explain, maybe even cry. But she didn't. She just stood there, swaying slightly in the breeze. "You're really not going to come back?" I shook my head. "Not even for a visit." Another pause. She looked at me for a few seconds longer, and I could tell she realized this wasn't just a detour. This was final. "Well," she said tightly, adjusting her purse, "you've made your choice." I nodded, "and I've made peace with it." Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. I stood in the garden, watching her leave, the flowers around me shifting in the wind like they'd been holding their breath. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished, and that was enough. Scene number 10, Contentment at Last Approx. 450 words. The morning started like most of them did now, with a breeze coming in through the open window and the soft sound of gulls riding it. I poured my coffee slow, letting the kettle hiss and settle. The ceramic mug had a small chip near the rim, but I liked it that way. Nothing in this little cottage was perfect, and that's what made it feel right. It felt lived in, earned. Outside the window, the garden had finally taken shape. Daffodils stretched their heads toward the sun, and the rosemary I planted back in March had started to thicken. I'd spent years putting things into the ground, things I never had the time to nurture. Now, each morning, I watered and watched them grow. I sat down at the table by the window and unfolded the newspaper. Same bench, same chair, same pot of coffee, black and strong the way Marion liked it. I could almost hear her footsteps when the radio crackled on and played one of those sea shanties she used to hum in the kitchen. The phone vibrated once on the counter. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Janine's name had been popping up every few weeks now, usually around the first of the month. The messages varied, sometimes apologetic, sometimes angry, but always incomplete. Never once did she say the words that would have mattered. Never once did she ask how I was. I let the phone ring. Then I turned it over, face down. The paper rustled as I turned the page. Nothing urgent. Just headlines about road repairs and tourist traffic. All things that no longer felt like they applied to me. I sipped my coffee and looked out at the water beyond the garden wall. The same water I'd fished as a teenager. The same stretch where Marion and I used to walk when the kids were still small enough to hold our hands. If I had regrets, they were few now. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss the weight of pretending. What I missed most was already gone, but not entirely. Marion still lived in these quiet moments, in the radio, in the lavender I planted because she loved the smell. I closed the paper and leaned back in my chair, the morning sun stretching across the floor. No noise, no obligations, just peace. And for the first time in decades, I knew I had finally come home.